Oh, there's some sound there. So just really looking forward to working with the Townsville Diocese today. And it's great to be a part of the e-learning guide training. Just want to point out a couple of things for you. In the chat box just to the side, you're free to chat at any time, write your questions and answer the questions in there. Want to make it as interactive as possible. Roby, if you need to contact me outside of the chat, you can just send me a message via Google Hangouts like we were doing this morning, and I'll pick them up there as well. So it's great to be a part of today's session. So for those of you who haven't met me before, I'm Mike. I'm one of the lead trainers at usingtechnologybetter.com, and we work a lot with schools, helping them to develop and deliver professional development plans, technology plans, and so on around schools. So we've done a fair bit of work with your diocese over the last couple of years, and it's been really good to see how you've developed over time, how you've been implementing some great techniques in there as well. So today what I'm going to do, I'm going to ask you a lot of questions. I want you to take the time to either write down the questions or just write down the answers, and then I want you to feed them back. So what I want you to do is just jump in and make it as participatory as possible. Roby, by all means, one of the questions just came up. Can others join via the link and the chat direct? Yep, they sure can. So if you just give them the link that I sent you, and it's in the program agenda for today, they are more than welcome to join via that as well. So today, basically, what I wanted to do is just give you a bit of an introduction, talk through some of the things that we're working on at the moment with schools around this concept of bring your own device and one-to-one technology plans. Give you a lot of questions to think and consider as you go back to your schools. And then from there, what I want you to do is just give you a little bit of some practical advice on some of the best ways we can work with this. In today's session later on, when we work on some search techniques, then we're going to pull it all back into a little bit more of a pedagogical approach, and we'll talk about how we can have some targeted innovation that will really help our teachers in the sessions as we go back to our schools to be able to deliver training for them. So I'm just going to start to share my screen, and we'll jump into the slides that we've got for today. All right, so on your screen at the moment, you'll see that there are some ways that we can stay connected after today's session. Roby would have handed out a lot of our details, but just so we can run through them and have them in front of you again, we have a website that we write our blogs to, and we put up there training videos and tips and tricks and so on, and that's at usingtechnologybetter.com. So at some stage, we'd love you to head over there. You can type into a search term, see what we've got. You'll also notice from there that there's some resources that are available to you. One of the resources that we've developed is a new course called freetechnologycourse.com. With this course, you can choose to do either a Microsoft strand, or you can do a Google strand on that as well. So there's two strands, and we just walk you through step by step how do we use technology with our students. The other option that you've got there, and so if you're on Twitter, you can follow me at Mike Redding. And if you go and you're on Google Plus and you're using Google Plus to build your professional learning network, then you're able to also access that through google.com/plus Mike Redding. So a number of different ways that we can stay connected, and would love to continue to have this discussion past what we're working on today. So I'll put those resources up for you as well. As we go through today, you'll see that there's a number of questions that I'm going to be stopping and asking you. And so with those questions, what I'd love you to do is take the time to answer them. But at the end of today, I'll also give you a resource that has all those questions listed out for you. And you'll be able to go along and just go back through and reflect, or pass those on to other teachers as well that are in your school. Now, one of the great things that I'm working through at the moment with one of my mentors is this concept that we should really question everything. And so hopefully that's what we're going to do today. Sometimes maybe because we're a little bit busy, maybe because maybe sometimes it's because we're a little bit naive, but sometimes we tend to believe things that other people tell us that aren't necessarily true. And I want to just point you in a few directions today that might have you examining that just a little bit. But one of the things I want you to do today is I want you to question everything. I want you to question your assumptions. I want you to reflect on your practice in the classroom and in your school. And hopefully at the end of today, what you'll come away with is a clearer vision of what you're trying to achieve this year. So for the ELGs in the room, you guys are in a bit of a tough position because you've been nominated, or maybe you're the last person standing. I'm not sure how you became to be in the ELG role, the e-learning guide role. But maybe you've been nominated because you've been seen to be doing some great things with technology in your class. But this doesn't automatically make you a great leader and a great trainer of other teachers. And the reality is it's tough to lead from the middle, because when you're trying to encourage other staff members, you know what it's like. Your peers just see you as another teacher, as one of their peers. And so quite often it's hard for you to be able to encourage change, to lead up the chain, but also to lead your peers as well. And so quite often a person will come up to me after I've been in a school and they'll say something like, you know what, I've been saying exactly the same thing that you have been saying today, and I've been getting no change, but yet you come in and you say it and everyone thinks it's amazing. What is with that? And I guess I want you to be encouraged, like, don't be discouraged by that. Really what it is, that it's just that I'm a fresh voice. Maybe I've got a slightly different way of saying things, but ultimately I'm not one of you, in the sense that I'm not one of your team. I'm not one of your teachers. And so don't get discouraged when you're going back there and you're trying to help other teachers to embrace technology. You're helping to inform the decision making, the debate. Just be aware that there are lots of resources and that you can use. For the principals that are watching, you guys are also in a tough position because you're in charge of a program that has a potential to, I guess, create a lot of momentum, but it's also got the potential to make a lot of people frustrated. And so I don't know your exact situation, but I'd be willing to bet with all the principals that we work with across a year that you're feeling like most other principals. You kind of feel like you're sandwiched between misinformed parents who are demanding technology use, but they're looking at it through the eyes of a consumer, not necessarily the eyes of a teacher. You've maybe got resistant teachers, and then you've also got an education system that requires you to report on and I guess be judged by others on a set of metrics that technology doesn't necessarily directly influence. And so you have, I guess, a juggling act inside there. So I want you to start to question how things are for you, where you're going, and how you're going to get there. Now, here's the interesting thing about technology use in schools. Technology and BYOD programs or one-to-one programs is not a new thing in Australia. Right back in 1995, the first government school in Melbourne actually initiated a one-to-one plan. So fast forward 20 years down the track, we've been promised a lot of things. We've been promised revolutions. We've been promised that education will be turned on top of its head. We've been promised that students will learn better, that they'll be more engaged. We've had teachers tell us that technology is going to change the way that students learn. And there's been lots talked about in those 20 years. But I think if we stopped and we actually looked at where we are and where we've come in those 20 years, I think there's been, maybe there's a lot to learn. Now, I'm going to try and show a video for you that talks a little bit just about this. And so the video, if you're on a computer, should just start for you automatically. If you're on a tablet or on an iPad, something like that, you will actually have to just hit the play button. So let me just stop sharing this screen for a second, and we'll head back over here, and I will play the video for you. Okay. Oh, looks like it's not going to run. All right, I'll send you a link to the video later on. It's just a video by some guys in the States who are talking about this whole concept of education revolution. And they start off by saying the way back when radio was invented, radio was going to be the thing that revolutionized education. And then it was the video disc player, and that was going to revolutionize education. And then after that, there was talk of the personal computer. And there's all these revolutions that were promised, but then sadly lacking. So let's just jump into the slide deck and we'll continue on. So here's the first question for you. We've been asked and promised so many things about technology, about changes to education. So what I want to ask you is this question here. What is missing? We've seen that change has been promised, but what is missing in education? What is missing? Where's the gap between what has been promised that technology and education can deliver and what we have in our classrooms or in our schools right now? So for those of you who are watching online, what I want you to do is I want you to just think about this, and then I want you to type an answer into chat for me. For those of you that are in the room watching this on the screen, what I want you to do is either just open up your computer, type your answers, write it on a pad, or maybe just have a quick discussion and share it with the person next to you. So I'm going to give you about 2 or 3 minutes just to think this through, and then some kind of a response. What's missing? All right, while you're going to answering that question, I'm just going to jump out of here so I can see the chat messages start to come in. So where's the disconnect? Why haven't we seen all that we've been promised that we're going to see? Once you've got some answers, just type them into the chat box on the right-hand side of your screen. Give you about 1 more minute. All right, about 30 seconds. All right, I can see we've got 23 people in the live session. So if one of you guys would like to start typing in your results, that would be awesome. What do you think? Where's the disconnect? All right, 10 more seconds. All right, that'll do us. So let me just share my screen and we'll have a look at where I think some of this disconnect has actually happened. All right, so what's missing? So it seems to me that there's been a revolution promised, but maybe what we haven't had is a revolution. Maybe what we've had is been more of an evolution. So there's been an evolution in education, not a revolution. Now, we want to be in the business of teaching better. Okay, we want our schools to be better. We want the staff that we're helping to lead and encourage and train, we want them to teach better. We want to create better learning experiences for our students. We want our students to be able to learn better. We want in schools. But I don't know if you've ever taken the time to actually ask the question, what does better mean? Now, does better mean that it's more engaging for the students? Does better mean that we get better results? Is the fact that teaching is better or that learning better, is it that it's more trendy? And if teaching with technology is a better way, why is it better? Now, when I ask teachers that question, I actually get the opportunity to sit and eyeball them, to look in their face, to have a conversation with them. Generally what happens is we start off with this general notion about, well, things are better and they should be better. But when we ask for specific ways in which they can be better, sometimes we struggle. Now, we've got to understand this because after 20 years of having a one-to-one or a technology plan in schools in Australia, you'd think that we'd be able to answer the question more succinctly about how is technology enhancing things? Why is teaching better with technology? How is learning enhanced? So we need to be aware that the fact that innovation in and of itself won't transform education. I think we've seen for long enough that there is innovative educational practices, and we go to innovation technology conferences and we're always looking for the next shiny thing and the next light gadget and what's going to happen here and how can we turn this and upside, put it on its head. But generally what I think happens in schools is that we have this concept of untargeted innovation. Now, untargeted innovation is where we get caught up in the pressure to deliver a technology plan. And so we go to conferences and we go to events and we hear other people's wonderful stories about innovation and we try and copy what they're doing. But at the end of the day, it kind of falls short. And so we're left with a program that we find is frustrating. So targeted innovation is where we look at technology and we look at the pedagogical potential of how that technology can change things, and then we focus our attention on there. And the focus isn't how can we get faster at this or how can we get further with this. It's about how do we truly plummet into the depths of this thing and really try and change how it works. One of my favorite stories is about this guy by the name of Bill. And Bill is a man, he's galloping down the street on his horse, and one of his friends yells out to him, "Hey Bill, where are you going?" And so Bill looks out over his shoulder as he's hurtling down the street and he says, "I don't know, ask the horse." And, this often to me reminds me of a lot of schools' technology plans and their BYOD plans, that if you're in charge of developing ICT in your school, an interesting question to ask yourself is this: who is driving the technology agenda in our school? Quite often what happens is we can end up on this technology plan, we can end up on this desire to create a better learning environment for our students and a better teaching environment for our teachers, but we don't quite understand who's driving the agenda. We know that we're hurtling towards some sort of a result. We know there's somewhere that we've got to get to, but we're not necessarily in control. Technology is kind of like the horse, and the horse is taking us, but we don't know exactly where we're going to end up. So I wanted to just take a moment to look at this concept of who's driving the agenda, the technology agenda in your school. Now, there's several agendas or several people that can run an agenda in our schools, and this is as we've been working a lot with schools over, especially the last year, we've been able to dig down into some of these agendas and then find out where they actually lead us. So one of the first places, or one of the first things that can drive a technology agenda is actually technology companies. Now, one of the great things that companies can do for us, the technology companies, is that they create this sense of a feeling like you always need to find the latest and greatest technology to achieve your outcomes. Now, here's an interesting question for you that you might want to consider. Out of this concept of bring your own device, where did this really start? Where did the concept and where did the terminology come from? Bring your own device. Just stop and have a think about that for a second. Where did that come from? BYOD, bring your own device. Do you know the whole concept of BYOD, or bring your own device, was actually developed by technology companies? Were you aware of that? Not just bring your own device in the business world, but bring your own device in technology. Now, I get to sit in on a lot of meetings at big technology companies, and generally the head will come in and they'll start to talk, and they all start with a similar story. You know, they'll say, "Oh, my student is in X, Y, Z school, and they're in this year, and I've really come to understand the power of technology and how this can really differentiate my child's education." And so I'll talk about this with great passion about why they're in it, and they'll say, "And this is why we're in this market. We're here to make a difference with the next generation. We're here to drive change in education, and we believe that we can deliver a far better education system by using technology." And then they'll go on to say, "Now our goal is this year to ship X amount of devices." Now, as you sit there and you listen to that, knowing that the whole concept of BYOD really was delivered and developed by companies to sell more computers, it actually makes sense, doesn't it? That the more devices they can get into the hands of students, the more devices they get to sell, and so on. Now, it's not all bad. It's not a bad thing that the BYOD was developed by companies to try and sell more devices, because what's happening is that schools that are strategic in their thinking, that understand that this is where this agenda is being driven from, well, then you can leverage this enormously in your school, and you can create perfect opportunities to partner with these companies to get what you need in terms of education. So I've seen some schools who have partnered with technology companies that have been able to tap into professional development budgets that weren't necessarily there beforehand. They've found ways to develop support systems, insurance systems, and so on. Because at the end of the day, the technology company wants to sell technology, and the school wants to enable the students to have technology, but technology that works. And so if you're thinking and understanding this concept, then one of the greatest things you can do is leverage this to the best of your ability to make the best purchasing decisions you can. So it's not a bad thing, but you just need to be aware of who's driving the agenda, and then make sure it's you. Make sure you're driving the agenda. So at your school, for the e-learning guides, who's driving the agenda at your school? Is there technology companies who are driving the need for new technology, the latest technology, the most up-to-date technology? Or is it coming back from a great understanding of how technology enhances education? Now, there's another agenda that often gets pushed in education, and that's an agenda that gets pushed by researchers. Now, when you make your decisions, or when your decision making is informed by research, you can be headed for disaster. So as educationalists, we love research. It informs our thinking, it kind of validates our direction, it makes us feel secure in our policies. And I can still remember with shock, I guess, when I sat down with a journalist one day and we were talking about some famous researchers and educational researchers. And in that, we were talking about the research that was informing decision making. And they sat down and they showed me a long list of research articles that had, if I mentioned them, you'd probably know them. and then actually showed me that each one of those educational research projects had actually been funded by large businesses trying to make a point, trying to prove a particular stance. So these researchers, whilst they were doing great research, were actually funded by companies who were saying, what we'd like you to do is research this and find a way to show that this could be a possibility. So the ramifications for schools that just blindly follow along the latest research, that can be enormous. So it might sound a little bit cynical, but a large percentage of the most popular research being quoted at conferences and in blogs have been funded by companies like Microsoft, like Google, to make a point. Now, if I was to ask you and say, who would be one of the most talked about researchers in education right now, who would you say that would be? Who would be one of the education researchers who are really informing thinking, creating debate, changing the direction of technology? I want you to have a think about it, write it down, maybe talk to the person next to you for a second and see if you can have some consensus. For those of you who are watching, what I want you to do is I want you to type it into chat for me. Who is one of the most popular researchers right now? So I'm just going to stop sharing my screen so I can come back to chat and see if I can see any responses in there. All right. Who would be one of the most popular people right now in education who's informing our research decisions? I'd be interested to see if any names pop up in chat. You just see here that Lisa's just joined, so welcome, Lisa. One of the things about Google Hangouts is that there's actually a delay, a Hangout on air delay, and so you might be 20 seconds, 30 seconds behind. So I'm just going to wait a second and give you a chance to catch up and then just quickly type that in for me. For those of you who are thinking it through, there might be somebody whose name starts with a J, last name starts with a H. That could be one person. You might be thinking of somebody, maybe you've heard of someone like Sharon Oviatt, who has done a lot of research around the concept of computers and interface design, and we might have some time to dig into some of that research in the next month's training, where we're going to look at are all devices created equal? So who's heard of John Hattie? John Hattie, it'd be one. So we've got here, we've got Hattie, we've got Fullen would be another person. Yep, so we can see that they're coming in. Just out of interest, I wonder how many of you have quoted John Hattie in a discussion or in a conversation, either at lunch or in an ICT meeting. Maybe you've wanted to chat to them about their statistics, about size. Maybe you've talked about class size. Maybe you've talked about the feedback and so on. So here's an interesting thing. Let me just share my screen again, and I'll show you some interesting statistics around this. So in terms of driving the technology agenda, sometimes it's research. John Hattie is well known. He's been, just in July last year, he was appointed by the federal government to the chairmanship position in the Australian Institute of Teaching and School Leadership. So many of you would be aware of AITSL. And so he's now the chairman of that. So quite often Hattie is discussed in all sorts of environments. Now here's an interesting thing. John Hattie wrote a book about his research, and that book's been a phenomenal success in terms of units sold and opportunities that have opened up for him. And I guess it really took the educational world by storm. But if you have a look into some of this research, you'll find that there are lots of researchers out there. There's statisticians and mathematicians who have looked at his research, they've looked at his maths and his calculations, and they've said that actually his research calculations are completely wrong. That he basically, his whole notion and the research that he presented is completely inaccurate. Now, I've read some blog posts on this, and I've actually listened to some interviews where Hattie has been interviewed about this, and he actually admits that that some of his information in the book was wrong, that it's not is it just out of date, but it was actually mispublished, and that some of his calculations were there. Now, is everything that he published in that book wrong now, and so is all of that research, worthless? Well, that's not the case. But here's the point. If you just blindly listen to what other people tell you and then just simply follow along, then what happens is that this can sometimes drive an agenda in your school that maybe is not the best fit for you. So the problem is that you can find data to support just about any claim. So for instance, here's a slide for you. Sometimes we look at correlations and we'll say, well, more technology will correlate to better learning outcomes, whatever that might be. So here's a graph that I found about some correlations. And here's a correlation here that shows you per capita consumption of beef in the United States. And that, guess what? It correlates exactly with the number of deaths that are caused by lightning in that year. So you go right back to 2000, you can see that there's a strong correlation between how much beef gets eaten and how many people die by being hit by lightning. So you can find different resources and you can find different research projects, and then you can correlate them and you can make them say just about anything you want. So here's my point. If research is driving the direction of your technology plan, you need to do some research before relying on the research. Now, there's a guy by the name of Dylan Williams, and Dylan Williams says this about educational research. And I want to give you the first part of it, and I'll finish off his quote in a minute. But he says, educational research can only tell us what was, not what might be. So basically, when we're doing research, we're looking back into the past and we're looking at what was, not what might be. He goes on to say, he says, moreover, in education, what works is rarely the right question, because everything works somewhere, but nothing works everywhere. And I think that's really powerful, that everything works somewhere, but nothing works everywhere. So we need to be careful of the research that we're looking at and the research that's informing our decisions. So does this mean that research is invalid? No, it doesn't. School leaders can still glean insight from research, but we need to be aware that that the approach that research can have, and we need to look at it in a balanced way. So we've had two different types of agendas that can drive our technology plans. So the first one is big companies who need to sell technology. And the second one can be research, which can inform our decision-making process. So there's a third type of people or force that drives our agenda, and this is the parents, the parent body. Now, when your parents drive the agenda of technology in schools, what you do is you run the risk of making decisions that make sense in a consumer market, but it doesn't always apply to education. So when parents are involved in the decision-making process, one of the ways that they decide on what is the best device to have and how do students learn and so on, it comes down to a concept around price. Now, price is incredibly important when making decisions about what technology families are going to use, especially if you're asking the parents to purchase these devices. But when the weight of the decision making is placed in the hands of the parents, and we feel the pressure of asking them to dig into their pockets and to finance these new tools, what happens is it almost becomes a race to the bottom. Now, what we need to do is we need to inform our decision making around what is the best device that promotes learning, that enhances learning. And so not all devices are created equal. So when we're looking at this from a purely consumer point of view, that doesn't necessarily answer the question of what best drives learning. So you have the parents who can sometimes drive this, and parents should be involved, but we need to have a program in place where we educate the parents about what education needs. So last time I checked, I've never found a school that has gone back to the parents and have asked them, what's the best way for teachers to teach? We wouldn't do that, and so we shouldn't ask the parents what's the best device to support learning, because they don't understand the teaching process. Now, there's one other one that drives our decision-making process and drives our agenda, and that's when we feel the pressure to follow what other successful schools have done. So schools that often do this, what they do is that they adopt a program without understanding the context and the school culture that this program has flourished in. So I want to finish this quote that's up on the screen right now from Dylan William, where he said, here, what works is rarely the right question, because everything works somewhere and nothing works everywhere. So here's the last part of that, which is why in education the right question is, under what condition does this work? So there's the question that you really need to consider. Under what conditions does this work? Now, when we go off and we just go to a conference, or we hear about a school talking about the wonderful things technology has done for them, we need to be aware that schools aren't going to get up and talk at a technology conference or in a technology meeting about all the things that went wrong, all the failures, all the frustrations. All right, we love to talk about our wins and our successes. We hate to talk about failure. And so what we need to do is we need to take the time to actually understand the context about what is happening. What's the culture of that school? What are the teachers like? What's the students like? How do the teachers teach? How do the students learn? And then once we understand their unique context, what you'll understand then is, where's the differences to our context, and will this work or not? Now, out of all the schools that we've worked with that have had successful technology plans, where technology has been really used to enhance learning, each of these schools have come up with their own plan. They haven't borrowed it from anyone else. The reason is that they've taken the time to look at their frustrations, their shortcomings, and then they've found solutions that meet their needs. So for you to come along and then take that as a carbon copy with a different set of needs, it won't necessarily fit. The other thing you need to be aware of is that quite often schools talk the talk, but they don't necessarily walk the walk. So there was some research done by a company out of America about the whole concept of 21st century skills and 21st century learning. And so they went and they interviewed a number of schools that were well known for their technology use. Now, when they interviewed them, you could see here that of those schools, 94% of those schools were able to reference 21st century skills. They were able to name them, they were able to talk about them, they were able to talk about them in context, and so on. But when they actually went and they examined what the school was actually doing, not just talking about, but actually doing, 1% of those schools were able to actually define it in terms of their curriculum and their practice. So there was lots of schools that understood the context, but then very few schools, 1% of those schools interviewed, were able to actually say, here's 21st century schools, here's how I use it in my classroom, here's how it links to the curriculum and pedagogy. So we need to be very careful who we listen to. Now, your schools can have an incredibly successful BYOD program, but questions I want you to be able to answer when you're going back. Because I guess at the end of the day, why I wanted to share this with you today at the very beginning of this year is that I don't want you to feel like more training is the answer. Now, as someone who delivers a lot of training, that training will help, absolutely, but you need to find out the right training and then target it to the right people and so on. So here's some questions I want you to consider as you're thinking about what training would I deliver, what pedagogy do we need to transform, where are we going in terms of a technology plan. So the first question that you want to be able to answer this is, it's about your present context right now. So the question is, how do your students learn and how do your teachers teach? So how do your students learn and how do your teachers teach? Now, there's a whole range of questions that would come up underneath this, I guess, in terms of this this question here. And I'm going to give these to you in a minute, and you'll have time to go back through and have a look at them. But the first thing is, here's some questions that just get you thinking on this. And I'll pause for 20 seconds between each of them, and you can just have a quick reflection time. So do students learn better when they have access to a pen? Have you considered that? So we're talking about that all technology is not created equal. So when it comes to what technology you're going to use and what training are you going to provide, do students learn better when they have access to a pen? What do you think, yes or no? Another question that you might want to consider is, do our teachers display resilience and persistence when they face technology difficulties? So we all know that technology doesn't work immediately. Sometimes there's issues with that. So we want to make sure that our teachers have a level of resilience and persistence. So is that there in your school? Just have a quick think. What about your students? You know, sometimes we think that students will just persevere and persist with technology, but we know that that's not the case, right? So students, when they face with a problem, sometimes they just give up straight away. Another question that you might want to ask yourself is, as a school, do we tolerate or do we celebrate or do we resist change? So as a culture in your school, do you resist change? Do you tolerate change or do you celebrate change? Where would you be on that change continuum? All right, another question for you is this one around engagement. So is student engagement and learning enhanced with the use of technology? And before you just give a general yes or no answer to that, how will you measure this? So what measurement systems do you have in place to actually track the fact that engagement has gone up, that learning has been enhanced because you're using technology? How are you going to measure that as your school? This is your present systems. What is in place right now? All right, and the next one we've got here is, how will we use technology to enhance the outcomes we're already experiencing? So in your schools, you've already got some great things happening. Regardless if you're a high school or a primary school, you've already got some good things happening in your school. Students are achieving at a great level in some areas. So how is technology going to enhance those outcomes? How can you actually take that great stuff and make it even better? All right, and here's a last question for you. Are we going to try and fix our weaknesses, or are we trying to build our strengths? Why are you using technology? Are you using technology because there's a number of things in your school that you're not happy about and there's a number of frustrations you're trying to solve? Or are you using technology to actually enhance what's working well for you? What's the strategy? So what's in place right now? So the first question, how do our students learn and how do our teachers teach? The next question that we want to look at here is, how will our students learn and how will our teachers teach? So this question here is primarily dealing with the vision. The vision isn't about what device is best and what platform is best, or it's not about that. It's not about, will your parents fund things? Will, you know, the diocese have to fund? Where's the money coming from? All of that is strategy based. This question here deals more with, how will our students learn and how will our teachers teach? It's about the vision of this. And here's the thing we need to understand about the difference between vision and strategy. When we have a vision, the vision stays the same, but the strategy is constantly changing. So you don't need to develop a strategy at this point, you need to develop a vision. So when it comes to developing and communicating your vision, here's what a little activity that's always good for you to remember, and it's a great little teaching tool for those of you who are in the classroom. When we speak in pictures, not in words. Okay, are you aware of that? We speak in pictures, not in words. So when I say the word to you, elephant, what do you see in your mind right now? Do you see the letters that spell out the word elephant? And so you see it written out in the sky for you? Or do you see a picture of an elephant? So most of us, 99.9% of us would say, well, I see an elephant, right? But here's the thing about this elephant. The elephant that I see is completely different to the elephant that you see. The elephant I see is small enough to sit on a 10-cent piece. The elephant I see has pink legs. It has a yellow trunk. It has a tail that is so long that it could wrap around the elephant 5 times. So can you see that the more detail I give you, the more clearer that picture becomes? And so here's a thing for you to do. When you're giving vision either to parents or to teachers, or you're talking about training, the more I describe the vision, the clearer the picture becomes. So the more detailed your vision is, the more successful your plan is going to be. So we started off asking the question, how do our students learn and how do our teachers teach? That's our present reality. And then we start to look at how will our students learn and how will our teachers teach? Now, link this in with everything that I've talked to you about already today. In terms of who informs this vision. Is it the parents? Is it technology companies? Is it research? Where is this vision coming from? So the best way to establish our vision here is that we've got to be realistic about our present reality. So the question here is, what's the best way to establish our vision while being realistic about our present? So once you've got a clear picture about how your students learn and how your teachers teach, you can then start to design a plan that's going to meet your needs. Now, the plan, please don't get stuck into this concept of, right, I've just got to go and provide more staff training. I've got to do better training in my staff afternoons. We've got to get the staff together and do techie brekkies and all these strategy things. Basically, if you chase that too hard, what will happen is that you'll just continue to go round and round in circles, and you won't actually start to make a real lasting change in what's happening in your schools. So here is where, when you know where you are and you can realistically look at your vision, this is where you get to design a professional development plan, where you get to talk about infrastructure, device strategies, bridging the gap between where you are and where you need to be. So as you progress with your plan, your strategy can change to address the issues that arise. But as you do, what you need to do is just continue to establish that vision. Now, for those of you who are ELGs, for the e-learning guides in the room, maybe you're in charge of establishing that vision. That task has been given to you to establish the vision and so on. So what you need to do is you need to understand where this fits inside your school plan, and then be able to work with the teachers and the exec teachers to enhance that plan. For those of you who are in exec roles and you're looking at this here, then please don't feel like you need to solve the world's problems. This is not going to change overnight. We've spent 20 years with one-to-one in schools, and we already know that this is falling short. So I want to give you some questions that will help really narrow this focus down for you. And I'm going to give you 5 minutes just to work on this right now while it's fresh in your mind. So we've gone through, how do our students learn and how do our teachers teach? How will our students learn and how will our teachers teach? And then what we need to do now is we need to establish the best way to establish our vision by being realistic about our future. So here's some questions that will help you future-proof your thinking. And there's 3 things that I want you to focus on right now. And once again, I'm going to give you about 5 minutes to do this. So the overarching question here really is, do you know what you're trying to improve by using technology? That's the question. So what am I trying to improve by using technology? So here's 3 questions that you can run through. So is this better for thinking and learning? So the next task you're doing some professional development on in terms of technology use, the question shouldn't be, how am I going to change around the way I teach? A better question to ask would be, is this better for thinking and learning? Learning takes place in our heads. That doesn't take place outside of our bodies. So you can have all the latest gadgets, you can have all the shiniest new toys, you can spend a lot of money, but what you've got to do ultimately at the end of the day is find a way to enhance what happens inside a student's head. So you need to be thinking, is this better for thinking and for learning? The next question you want to be asking is, am I modeling this? So this is a big question, because quite often schools, when they ask for professional development, I mean, if I was to follow the way that schools quite often wanted to provide professional development to their teachers, and then I was to go and teach their students that way, I'd get the sack. So quite often, professional development is chalk and talk, stand at the front, show your stuff, but very little context, very little engagement, very little time for you to go and explore and to build resources to create, to problem solve, and so on. So as teachers, we want to model good learning practices. And so we want to be in the position of wanting to model good learning as well. And then the last one is there evidence for this? So is this better for thinking and learning? Am I modeling it? And what's the evidence around this? So we've already talked a lot about that. So what I want to do right now is I want to take 5 minutes out. I'm going to leave this slide up, and I'm going to let you really start to think about your own practice, about your plan for this year, about where you're heading, and start to think about, is my plans, is it here to enhance thinking, and so on. While that's happening, I'm also going to jump into chat, and I'll be able to see any questions that you have. So as we've been going, if any questions have come up for you, then you can type them into chat and I'll address those at the end of the session. So 5 minutes starts now. Write it on a piece of paper, have a discussion with people in the room. More than happy for you to type your answers or your questions into chat. All right, I'll give you about 30 more seconds. All right, so what are you trying to improve by using technology? All right, so where do we go to from here? We talked about that really what the most powerful thing that you can do is have your own plan. You need to be in control of your agenda. You need to be the ones at the school who are making the informed decisions. You're working on things in terms of your curriculum, in terms of your school culture, in terms of having a clear understanding of what you want to change. But at the same time, you need to be making those informed decisions. So at the beginning, I started off with a slide where I said, I want you to question everything. Hopefully today, as you've been sitting through this, you've started to reflect on, what are my assumptions? What am I just blindly following along? And then use that to inform that decision-making process. So where to from here? What I'd love you to do is be able to find your own path. As a school, I'd hate you to think that you felt the pressure to be just doing something, so you'll do anything, or that you're just blindly grabbing hold of anybody else's resources and then just using them for your own. Basically, what I'd like you to do is get clear on your present reality, and then also start to understand your future potential, but then find your own path in that. One of the things you want to focus on is targeted innovation. Now, we don't want innovation for the sake of innovation. We want targeted innovation. This is where we have a clear understanding of where we are, and we say, okay, I need to get from here to there, and this will be the path that will best suit my needs. And how to get there. Now, I want to give you some resources that will be able to help you just think through where you are and where you need to get to. So in those resources, there's two here. The first one is a resource that you can go to right now, which is bit.ly/BYOD plan, all lowercase. That resource right there is a digital leadership program that we've put together for schools in Australia and New Zealand, where we walk the school through a one-year coaching program, and we help them navigate that BYOD minefield, and we help them deliver a plan which is sustainable. I mean, that's a key right there. It's got to be sustainable. And so with our BYOD plan, we basically help you work out where you are right now, and then we help you understand where you need to be, and then we help you chart a place to get there. There's a whole lot of resources that come with that. There's a conference that we're running in Melbourne in the next few weeks that you'd be more than welcome to be a part of. There's masterclasses that are available. And ultimately what we'd like to do is to see a diocese-wide approach to this, where we can help you as a diocese move forward in there as well. So you might want to check out that the bit.ly/BYOD plan. All the questions that I've asked you today in a question document, which is at bit.ly/BYOD question. And with that sheet there, it has the questions that we've asked, a couple of the slides that I've given you today. And that might be a good resource for you to use in your own reflection, or to be able to go back to your school with a set of questions and then work through that with your ICT team. Into this afternoon session, we're going to dig into a little bit around the pedagogy of teaching and learning, and I'm going to help you dig into this concept around research and how do we use that to better inform our decision making. But it's also going to be a good opportunity for you to be able to help your students go through this process of questioning the validity of websites, finding similar websites, and so on. So the ability to ask the right question and find the right information is incredibly powerful. Now, at the beginning of the session too, we also mentioned freetechnologycourse.com. That's a website where you can go and for free you can download those. It's a 7-part video course that talks a lot about how do we engage students using technology, how do we do better research tasks, and so on. So you'll see some examples of what we're talking about there. But in this session, just wanted to keep it fairly general, to ask you some questions, to get you reflecting, and so on. So what I want to do is give you the opportunity to be able to ask your questions and have them answered. I'm not sure the best way to be able to do this. Maybe it's to type the questions into the live chat that's here right now. Or another option that we've got is that I can leave this presentation, Roby, and I can come back to the Hangout that you had started at head office there, and we can just chat and people can ask questions, and we can do that via video conference. I believe in the ELG guide agenda plan for today, there was a place for everyone to be able to join in on that as well. So Roby, I'm going to come back to the chat for this, and if you could just type in the best way that you want to go from here, and then we'll certainly do that. Okay. All right, so I've seen a few extra comments come in here as well. That's great. It's always interesting trying to juggle multiple systems. Okay. Maybe what I could do is just grab, in fact, let's try this. We're going to get really daring, Roby. I'm going to try and join your Hangout and leave this Hangout running at the same time. All right. So let me just, is that working okay, Roby? Can you hear me? Or is that feedbacking?
Okay, Mike, you're back in the Hangout?
Yes, I am.
Is that coming to someone else's?
Let me, all right, what I'll do is I'll leave this other Hangout that we had running, and I'll stop broadcasting that, and I'll come across to you in a second.